penetrating stadiums. Have you ever felt like the physics, right? Have you ever had the 80s just right up your ass with John or something? Is this started to
Welcome to the Psychic Guys. Today we're having a fireside chat with Angela Ford. Angela was a Project Stargate remote viewer from 1986 to 1995. After retiring from US intelligence after 32 years, she continues her psychic work teaching remote viewing and conducting self-help seminars based on the aura. She also works in the Laboratory of Fundamental Research in Palo Alto, California. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you for having me here. How's everybody?
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Angela.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've spoken to Angela twice now, because she came to Dash, and it's knowing her history and her integral part in remote viewing history. It's an honor twice now speaking to you, Anne.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dad. It's an honor to know you, though, too.
Oh, you two, guys.
No, we're big into
I have loads of questions, and maybe I should get those out of the way first, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I have huge problems with some of the history of remote viewing, especially the way Angela and some of the others were treated. Especially in like the historical books, like Paul Smith's book and stuff, and just in snide comments over the years. The way that the ladies in the program were, it seems they were you guys were treated much differently, derogatory. And you were called like the witches of like remote viewing and stuff. I just want to know how that makes you feel nowadays, and do you think we've surpassed that now, and people understand that you do have a really valued and integral role in real remote viewing history?
Well, I think that it wasn't so much about the women, it was the military, because a woman in the military could come in and be treated just like a man in the military. I mean, I remember them bringing in one woman named Gabby, and Gabby was years younger than me, but she retired as a captain or lieutenant in the military, but she was still in the reserves, but she was looked at as a military woman. Yeah. So that it wasn't so much the women, it was military. Yeah. Now, when I worked as an analyst before I went to the program, I worked as an analyst for Central American Affairs, and we would have to brief. And I would brief along with the military people, but I can remember I had 7-8 years, and these young female captains or lieutenants would come in, and they were just, I had to fight for everything. They were treated with more respect than I ever had, and they were younger and less experienced. So you had that military mentality, and I was told. Now I wasn't there, but this is just hearsay. But the secretary in our office told me that before I came to the unit, years before I came to the unit, everybody went out to work after one Friday night. The unit went out to work, and I guess they ate dinner and drank. Well, on that following Monday, they wanted to write up the woman for drinking on that Friday. It was like, you're crazy. I'll write you up for drinking too. So it's there, and they, even that. So, but I think more than anything, it was just the methodology. They just could not accept, as long as I was doing the ERV, the extended remote viewing. I think they put me in extended remote viewing because there was a new guy that came into the office to work, and he was in Germany, and when you work overseas, you're only allowed to be there 3 to 5 years. So his time was up, and he called his friend, our boss, and said, I need a job. And so the guy said, come. So the boss said, well, come on in. I'm in this unit. And this guy came in, and he didn't know anything, but he needed to train somebody. So he was new, so they put us together. That's how I think I got into ERV. And plus, everybody was in CRV. Ed Dames, Paul Smith, Mel Riley. Lynn was doing ERV. He got into CRV, because the push was for CRV because they had that manual, and the military loved to train, and they had a manual. So this, you go by this manual, and so it was the draw. Oh yeah, well they have a manual, and this is how you do it. So I really wasn't that wild to get into learning the CRV, because as soon as I went into the office, they knew that I did channeling because it was known before I went there. And they said it was a bad habit. They resented the fact that I got there through General Stubblebine, which didn't bother me, just because I've seen, so I had so much going against me at the time. But as long as I was doing the extended remote viewing by myself, and they were over here doing the CRV, everything was fine. Everything was fine. They left me alone. And I can remember they would have these meetings by themselves, and I'd be left out of these meetings. And I think once I was given the permission to do what I did, because my bosses saw the value in it immediately, then they jumped on me. And I said, why are you, you didn't pay attention to me before. Why the interest? And they wanted to, they said, well, it's never been used in an operational mode. And my bosses could have cared less, because we were getting results. Now, they wanted to watch me or monitor me, and they were going to grade me. And I said, you don't understand. You people are hired to remote view. And I think Paul at the time had an art degree. And I said, you people are hired to remote view like me. You're not. If I'm going to put myself in front of anybody or somebody, I would go to the scientist or somebody that could study this more scientific, not them, which wasn't good for their ego. And then my boss said that if anybody wanted to learn what I wanted to learn, they could come to me. I would teach them. I mean, I thought they were going to throw up. I mean, they were like, yeah. I mean, you should have seen their expressions. There's no way they were going to come to me. They wanted access to me to tell me what I had didn't work. And my boss said, this is a new method, and it's working. And if anybody wants to learn it, Angela's open to teaching you. And I mean, I thought they were like almost throwing up.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a logical point of view. If you're showing results, this is something with my students and in my work, it's like, I don't care what method people are using. What have you achieved? And is it actually showing positive results? It's hard. I mean, there's egos abound, in military. I've heard lots of stories that you've seen, certain egos clash historically. But you feel it's less about what you were doing and more about we're the military and we don't like people outside the military kind of coming into our space. That's what you feel it kind of was like.
Yeah, it was military. Oh yeah. Because I can remember. Oh yeah, it was military. I just remember being in the military. Women weren't that. I remember the one girl, Gabby. I mean, she wouldn't even look at me in the face and talk to me.
Wow. That must have been an incredibly hard-working environment, though, especially to try to be intuitive in that space with all that going on.
Oh, it was hard. That's why I think I was just so determined. I'm like, you know what? These people, I worked at a higher echelon. I dealt with the big, I dealt with more higher echelon people. Men that were higher rank, colonels, generals. I mean, these people they weren't going to get to me. In fact, we used to think it was funny. We used to go out to lunch and just laugh. We thought, I couldn't believe. And then we found out they came out into the open and saying things and doing things. And we're like, oh my gosh.
Do you think that could have been part of also is the fact that they may have known that you were getting reached out to by more higher ranking officials to actually do work, and maybe they weren't to the same degree?
They were
jealous.
Oh, they hated it because we had one guy, Dr. Verone. I mean, he would come right down from headquarters. He would work with me. They hated it. Yeah. But you know what? They were not nice to me. And it was, and it's hard because, and I remember there was one person, a couple people came after me, and they did have the talent, but they didn't have the confidence. And I saw there were a couple of people, and you could see that talent was there, but they didn't have that. they were still kind of comparing themselves to me. I'm like, forget about me. You're doing good. You do it. And there were people I saw that came in after me. And actually, I was happy that they could do well. And if anybody would have come in, I would have been happy for anybody. You want anybody to do well. You would want anybody to do well, especially in an operation. You would hate to see anybody fail. Mm-hmm. But I did see some people come in after me, and there was some talent there. And I don't know if they were just too young or too immature in the field. They were good, but they didn't quite understand the metaphysics. And so they had to be educated in that. So now, as they got older, I feel like they're doing better, but they didn't have that back then.
Yeah. When you say they had to be educated in the metaphysics, could you give us like a very quick potted version of your metaphysical ideas that you think they needed and that helped them in their practice?
Well, when I started to do my channeling, I started to go to an institute to learn, what is channeling? Why am I channeling? And then the metaphysical laws, the law of giving, it just spiritual, like how do you live? You give and back, karma, meditation, I guess just the laws of the universe, and more or less, why am I why am I the way I am? Well, I found out it was genetic. A large part is genetic. Usually when something happens in a person's life, something will happen in a person's life, whether a divorce, a death, loss, something will shake somebody up so bad that it may just kind of make them go into this, want to explore this kind of realm. Yeah. So that's but to bring somebody, just to pick somebody and bring them in the unit,
Yeah. Angela, did you have any, because, I spent many years doing what I call classical training in like clairvoyance and mediumship, all that kind of stuff. Did you have any kind of prior experience in what I call classical techniques?
Yeah, I used to go out of body a lot. Yeah. And I went out of body a lot. I levitated quite a few times. Now, I don't know how I did it, because all I knew, I was levitating, and then I just went, oh my goodness, and then I slammed down. But I feel that was something in the mind, must have connected something that was mental. Something was going on there. But, I channeled, I had out of body. Yeah. I started the channeling, which put me in connection with spirit, dead relatives. You go to spirit people and they want to know about their dead relatives. Yeah. And then from that point, I started to do tarot cards. I started to read people. I did a couple of times I levitated, and I had UFO experiences.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was all there. And my mother, she was psychic. I mean, she used to drive a car and go down roads that didn't exist and be.
Mine too. It does for me seem to be as far as I'm aware of anyway, a family trait that goes down through the generations.
Well, for my side, I knew my mother's side had it because my mother had it, her sister had it, and two cousins on my mother's side had the ability. Yeah. Now, what I learned years later, that my grandfather, before he came from Italy, I'm Italian. I'm as Italian as you can get. Everybody was, I'm just Italian. But I was told my grandfather, before he came to the United States, he traveled Europe with a tray with a deck of tarot cards and a bird. Oh, wow. And so if somebody wanted a reading, they would pay him and the bird would pick the card and he would give them a reading. So it must be on both sides of the family. But I just found that out recently. But it is genetic. My mother was crazy psychic. I mean, my brothers would just want to deny her, and she would say, you can't go out and talk about this. And my brothers was like, no worry. Don't worry, we won't.
Yeah. I kind of think.
Yeah, it was that. Right? I mean, she was just nuts. But yeah, because she really was good. She didn't know she was psychic. Yeah. And then when my sister and I started to develop ourselves, she really wanted to be a part of it. And And so she was taking these metaphysical classes, and her friends would go with her, and they would call me, and they say she was good at psychometry, taking people's objects, and the professors loved her. And she went to one guy, and he told her she was a highly evolved woman. Well, my friends called me, and they started laughing. They said, we just thought she was goofy, and here she's highly evolved. So anyway, we started calling her the highly evolved woman, but she used to come down D.C. I was from Pennsylvania, and she liked to come to Washington, D.C., which is about 5 hours. And it was big we would go to the metaphysical churches in Virginia, and she always wanted to go to, I had to go find out who was doing meditation class. She just wanted to be such a part of it. So I took her one time to a meditation class, and here everybody came out of meditation but her. She was like laying there, and everybody ran over to her. They couldn't get her up. She went out of body. I was so embarrassed. And then she said, oh my goodness, I saw this eye and it was looking back at me, and everybody was going, oh, that was your third eye. I mean, they thought she was great. So then I started taking her to these places, and she would tell people she was highly evolved. My sister would say, stop telling people. And say, Mom, stop telling people you're highly evolved. She goes, but I am.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, it's no wonder that you have so much confidence, because I feel like you have that fighter spirit when you're in the program, and you're like, no, I'm not gonna, like you mentioned that others may not have had that, but you grew up with this, and so it was just part of your life. So it was not something that someone could just bully you out of. It seems like, because it was your experience, and it just is real to you. You know that.
It was. I felt I felt I belonged there.
Yeah,
this was where I belonged. Now, a lot of people cannot take living in a pre-World War I, not pre-World War II, but a pre-World War I building. The work conditions were terrible. Some people can't take the abuse. I just felt that's where I belonged, and that was it. And and let everything fall as it may. It's a wonder that building didn't even get on fire. We used to smoke cigarettes on the deck. And my cigarettes would never go out. I don't know what I don't smoke anymore, but when I did, and it would roll under the steps and roll under the That's
funny.
The cigarette. You're going to burn this place down.
Well, I'd love to hear what, when you were in the program, like what was one of the most wild cases that you worked that you're able to discuss? I think that's something I bet other people would also love to hear. Like, what's something that really was maybe even shocking to you, the results of it, and really just which shows the efficacy of these abilities and how they can be used. Just if you have a story you'd like to share about that our audience would be interested in, just as a kind of open-ended question.
You know the Jordan case, right? There's Charlie Jordan.
Yeah.
I think that was I really liked working the hostages.
Yeah.
The Lebanon hostages in. I really felt it was just important to me, because you could, really wanted to come out. You really wanted.
What's the setup for that? For those that may not know the history of that, how did that kind of begin?
Well, this is how it began. We had a new boss. I was allowed to do my automatic writing because we had a new boss. Ed May came into play, and he said, as long as the protocol is correct, how can anybody tell you how to do something like that?
True.
So anyway, my boss said, okay, let's try this. So they gave me Terry Waite. They gave me Terry Waite and then I was able to access and describe him. And my boss said, okay, that's pretty good. So then what he did is we started working on the other hostages, and he was bringing my results up to headquarters in Washington, D.C., from Fort Meade, Maryland to Washington, D.C., and my bosses were passing them around to the analysts in. So finally, the analysts came and they said, Higgins, Lieutenant Colonel Higgins, was kidnapped, and they wanted to get him really quick because they were afraid he was going to, they were going to kill him. Mm-hmm. So we got called in on a weekend, on a Sunday, to go work, and I had I said that Higgins was at a certain location and he was traveling a certain way. Well, when I was saying that, the analysts were downstairs, and they said as they were getting my information, they were getting reports from the area that he was where I said he was and was going this certain way. So
if I could pause you for a second, how were you accessing that information at that point? Was that in an ERV session, automatic writing?
No, automatic writing.
Got it.
I was in headquarters with a lot of people.
Got it.
So they thought that was pretty good. So then I went back to work, and we just started to do Higgins. Now, what we would do is I would work, where's this hostage? Where's that hostage? And they would take the results down to the analyst, and the analyst would take the results to the Israeli embassy. The Israeli embassy would call it in, and then they would go out and look. Now, I said that Terry Waite was in the Bekaa Valley at one time. They said he would never be there, but he was there. Mm. I had Higgins in. This was another thing. They kept asking me on that Sunday, where was Higgins? And I pointed to a location on an old piece of imagery, and there was nothing there. So, of course, Ed Dames, well, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Don't be so stupid. Don't be so silly. There's nothing there. And the analyst said, but that's an old piece of imagery. Mm. So we were working the analysts. We were working the hostages, and we were getting, at least we could identify. And I think I said Poe Hill had a sore throat, and he came out with throat cancer. So, So what happened was there was a hostage named Cordes. He was a German hostage, and they let him free. And one of the analysts went to Germany to interview him at Rhine 9. And he said, where's Higgins? And Cordes pointed to the place that I pointed to on the imagery. He pointed to the exact same, the coordinate. They must have had the coordinate or something. And the analyst said, but there's nothing there. And the guy said, oh, no, there's something there. They built something there to hold Higgins.
Wow.
So I was right. But It was a shame. They did kill him. Apparently, he must have died by accident about a month to 6 weeks after they had him. Mm-hmm. And they did the same thing with Buckley. They didn't want William Buckley. William Buckley died, and they didn't want us, but they acted like they were still alive, but they weren't. Yeah. And so they had Higgins's body on ice, and they were moving him. Mm-hmm. And at one point, I said Higgins is on water, and that didn't make any sense. But then it came out, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Great data. Do you think that your data or your way of remote viewing might have been helped because of your prior work as an analyst? You kind of knew the kind of data that you had to give along to the people that needed it?
Maybe it was my foundation.
Yeah.
Maybe it kind of worked as a foundation.
Because I do find that the people that I teach, they kind of bring their life skills into their RV in some way. Like I'm a graphic designer artist, so for me sketching in RV is pretty kind of easy.
Easy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was never a drawer, and I could never. My report. I was more verbal in the way that I reported, so I was more written. To get me to draw, I looked like chicken scratch.
Yes.
But yet you had somebody like Paul Smith and Mel Riley who were artists, and they would just love to draw. Yeah. So you're right. But I'm sure the foundation of what I had, I had what? Oh my gosh, I had many, many years of as an analyst even before I went there. So it could have been the foundation. Yeah, but everybody knows the Higgins case. Then
awesome work. Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just getting a bit of lag here on the internet. And to this day, are you still working for Dr. Ed May on projects?
Yeah, I work with him sometimes. We're trying to get a documentary going. You know, we were invited to Russia in 2015. And see, after the Cold War, Ed May was our contractor. And Ed May came right at the day after the Cold War. Ed May showed up at our office and he said, "You're going to give me money and I'm going to Russia." He said, "This is going to be the most open the country's going to be ever." And he said, "I want to get up there and I want to meet with the scientists. I want to know what they did, what they're doing." Yeah. So he went up there and he made several trips and he met the scientists. He met who was doing who. And eventually, I guess they trusted him that they introduced him to General Savin, who was the guy that was the head of the Soviet Union psychics, and then he met them. So there was travel back and forth, and then there was a book that Ed wrote, ESP Wars East, and then they wrote a book, you know, ESP Wars West versus East. So we got invited up there in 2015 in honor of these books. Some newspaper gave us a reception. So while we were up there, I asked these Soviet psychics, I said, "So how do you," they're Russians now. I said, "So how do you teach remote viewing, or what do you do?" And they said, "Oh, we channel." They did the channel. We opened up the channel.
The same thing. That's funny.
They were doing CRV. They explained to me what they did, and that's what they did.
Awesome.
But anyway, because of that trip, we spied on them, they spied on us. And now we're trying to do a documentary of that because Ed did get the access to the heavy hitters that were over there. The problem is that some of them are older now, and I think one person has passed. So we're hoping to, and I guess we can't go back there, but they can do the interview through Zoom or whatever. Yeah. So we're working on a documentary. We think that would be important.
Yeah.
We were told that we were going to get a, NSA has a spy museum that's open to the public. Yeah. They told us in October that they're going to put in the Stargate program. Yeah. So I'm working with Dale Graff and Ed May on that, and Joe McMoneagle.
Yeah, that's great.
And there is Ed and Dale Graff are just as tickled. I mean, they are so excited. And Dale keeps sending me these view graphs about, what do you think of have you interviewed Dale Graff?
I have several times now. Yeah, many times.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he?
He is fantastic. He's a huge font of RV knowledge that goes back decades. Yeah.
Oh, he was. I call him the father of RV because he was there. I mean, it's because of him. He was there at the inception. It's because of him there was a program. Because Ed and I came years later, but he knows so much. But he's like a little kid. And so, and I said, "Do you have those coordinates that I did?" And so he emailed me all this stuff. It's my, and I said, yeah, that's good. So he's excited, but he's a lovely man.
Both those projects, the NSA one and the documentary sound amazing and invaluable, really. This kind of resource we need. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the man who runs the NSA museum, he worked at the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C.
Right. Yeah.
And he said that there's no room, but eventually he'd like to get us to the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. and New York City. His name is Vince.
Yeah.
But yeah, he wants to put us on YouTube. He wants us to travel to the different intelligence organizations and talk about what we did. So we're getting promoted that way. We hope that the documentary, we need some funding for that, and we want to make it like a documentary where we could maybe get like a star narrator to kind of push it up instead of. So so I'm working for Ed. I teach remote viewing. I'm working with Ed and Dale on on the museum,
Yeah,
and Ed on the documentary. I haven't been in touch with Joe for a while, but I do teach at the Munroe. He makes me teach the RV. I teach. Okay, he thinks that you have to be born with the ability. He doesn't think you can teach it.
Yeah.
Now, Joe I feel like you can. If people are interested, they're interested for a reason. Maybe it's in they're being, so you can train people, you can teach them.
Yep.
So Joe called me up one time. He said, Angela, he said, I need a favor. I said, what do you need? He said, I want you to teach my RV2 class, the last session. I said, not a problem. He said, I had Ed May here. He said, but you know how Ed is. He gets up in front of the class and says, it's genetic. You can't teach it. You can't. Unless if he goes, and I have these students that just spend all of this money.
You know, I feel like I'm a perfect example. I mean, you're right. Maybe they just have like latent abilities that nobody knows. But I was very different than you. I was, as a kid and even growing up, and up until I learned about RV on Art Bell, listening to him interview remote viewers, I was as psychic as a rock, I would say. I had no intuition whatsoever. But starting the practice of remote viewing actually began to open it up. And it wasn't easy, though. I had to bang my head against the wall. It's just I have a personality where if I'm really interested in something, I'm going to do it until it absorbs me. So I wasn't even good, but I did it enough that it started to work. And then that basically led me into other things. It's funny, you talk about ERV and some more of the automatic type of stuff. That's actually what I do mostly now, is the ERV, because for me to be able to have a full visual experience, move around, just talk to people at the site, get information directly from them. And I'm not sure if I'm really talking to them. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking to them in real time, but maybe it's a part of a person at the site that I'm talking to that I can very quickly elicit information out of, and then obviously get good feedback for afterwards. It's funny. I started with the very pen and paper, super structured approach, but then that led me to the more spontaneous remote viewing, which is I use in markets every day now. So
that's what I'm finding. A lot of people that want me to teach them, they're coming out of that CRV world.
Yeah, totally.
And whenever they're like, this is it. When I say, okay, access and describe, I shut off my thing. And I come in the kitchen, come back. What do you got? They're very, they're good. This is it. Now, see, there was one time when I worked in the unit, when I was doing these operations, they got mad and they said, everybody here should learn CRV. And I said, fine. And everybody here should learn ERV.
Yeah.
So they said, okay. So I went through CRV training. I couldn't do it. I went through with Ed Day. I just couldn't do it. And the only reason I would do well is because he would lead me, right? He would give me so many hints, I wouldn't know what to say or do. Now then I made everybody do written. I said, okay, you can, you can do extended remote. And then I want these people to do extended remote viewing. And they did. But eventually if they went back to CRV and they left me alone, they were going to ping me. Mm-hmm. And and I said, okay. But anyway, I couldn't do CRV. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. It's definitely not for everyone. Absolutely. Yeah. And you teach now, do you teach a form of channeling or written RV, or is it ERV you teach?
Mostly ERV, but because I can, yeah. And then if they want channeling, I kind of lead them to what books to read, and I can help them with the channel. But that's more of an inward. You have to make the connection yourself. Yeah. So I try to help them make the connection.
That's something I'd love to go a little bit more in depth with you about, the channeling aspect. And I mean, I've had my own experiences. I know, Daz, I'm sure you have as well with your classical training. And what I found, because I've done a lot of training as well through remote viewing, I came out of the Dames camp originally, the TRV, and then I went and I learned CRV and all the others after that because I wanted to learn more, and eventually ERV. And one of the things that I found, though, is there's a lot of pen and paper remote viewers who they're not meditators. They're not really interested in that side of things. They're not necessarily spiritual. And then they go and do remote viewing, but they don't have any of the faculties, or they haven't been shown how to handle that side of reality. And
that's what I said before. They're coming, but they have no background. Anybody can do remote viewing, but it leaves out the spiritual. You're leading out the spiritual.
And I've seen people get walloped by it, though, where they get hit by it and they don't know what's going on. And so this might be something showing up in their space that they're sensing, and it's messing with them, or they're very scared about certain experiences they're having, and it's the fear of it, and they don't know what to do because they haven't been shown by someone who understands that side of thing. They've only said, no, put your pen on the paper, and that's all there is. Nothing else matters. Where there's actually this whole other world that exists that they're ignoring.
That's why I think I could do the channeling, because I had read the books. My mother had sent me a book after my father died. She said, read this book. You'll understand his death. Yeah. So when I went to channel, I could get that. So what kind of classical training did you have?
I started off very early, to be honest, but my mother was a psychic medium clairvoyant, and she ran the local spiritualist church. So she started letting me read her books, and I started training around about the age of 12. But I took 4 more lessons from the age of 16, and that was in clairvoyance, clairaudience, mediumship, healing. And then I joined a psychic development circle with 8 other people. I spent probably about 12 years essentially channeling. We all worked as a group, went off into the universe and just talked to and had conversations with different entities, and then wrote it down in notebooks. And then after all that, I found remote viewing. So I'm different than most remote viewers in that I had a really solid...
You had the...
Yes.
Okay, now let me tell you about fear, okay? Because I started to channel after my mother gave me this book. So I was in my apartment one night and I was channeling, and my sister came in from work and she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm channeling through a guide named George. And he was giving me information about my mother and dead relatives, about me, and my cousin was trying to have a baby, and then they were going to adopt, but they're going to get this. Okay, all of this stuff. So my sister says, I'm going to channel. So my sister starts channeling, and she says, well, I got a little guy here named Maury. And Maury said that he was a negative spirit. And I said, oh, Louise, I said, don't do that. I said, don't do that because there's negativity out there's bad. Oh, she said, okay. So she'd write a little bit more, and Maury would kind of pop his head and say, hey, I'm here and I'm a negative spirit. So my sister was taking an astrology class at the time, and the woman said, she says, you girls need to tell your sister, you girls need to get over to the Munroe Institute and start taking his classes because you're opening up, things are going on, and you need more understanding, which was fine. Well, in the meantime, my sister was doing automatic writing, and I was getting ready to go to the psychic program. So I asked some people at where I worked at the Army. I said, well, my sister's going through this, and this is her handwriting. And they said, oh, she needs to go to a psychologist. She needs help. So I went back to the apartment, and I told my sister, I said, Louis, do you think you need psychological help? She said, probably. So she kept writing through Maury. So one night, Maury says, you know what? He said, this is the last time I'm going to be with you. I'm leaving you forever. So by that time, we kind of got used to the little guy. And we're like, well, you're okay. You can stay if you want. He said, no, I am leaving you forever. Mm-hmm. So my sister goes to Mansbridge the next day, and she says, I'm channeling through a guide named Maury. And Fred Mansbridge goes, no, you're channeling through a guy named Maurice. Maurice is the positive and Maury is the negative. So Maury did leave us forever. He said, and he said, address him as Maurice. So that really taught me a lot about fear. I mean, we were so afraid that this little guy, was he impish? What was he? And then that taught me that's negative and positive. It taught me a huge lesson.
That is super unusual for a negative entity to come along and say, hello, I'm negative. Usually they pretend to be positive or something they're not, just to introduce themselves so politely. It's really weird.
Yeah, and we liked. I mean, he was sweet as could be. I mean, very sweet. And Mansford says, "No, just take him as Maurice." And then I knew. But you're right, Brett. You're right about things are. I mean, so many people want to be psychic, and they have that fear in them.
Yeah.
You know, and I still get, the fear, and they're all uptight about it. And I'm like, look, what do you want? And I go, okay, I want it. And then we proceed.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I had it was funny, my experience, because I started remote viewing. I had no idea about any of this other stuff. And so, but by doing lots of remote viewing, I began having a lot of experiences that I couldn't explain that actually were a bit terrifying for me. And so where I had orbs flying through my apartment that I could see with my eyes, I was having the craziest lucid dreams. I was having like shadows in my apartment. So it was in like a lucid, like half awake, half asleep state. So all sorts of stuff was going on. And I didn't know what to do about it. So for me, it was almost like it felt like a trial by fire. I didn't really have a guide through it. And I went through it.
you learn.
Yeah, I was thrown in the deep end. And then I felt like after those experiences, I was like, okay, well, this is actually useful for me, because now I feel none of that stuff phases me whatsoever. And I can help other people if they're running into stuff, or I can help handle other things that people are running into, because I had that type of a trial by fire at the beginning experience. So, but now I'm like, you don't have to do that. New people like, just like, please, like, you don't have to have these like really scary experiences to start with. That's like, it's really a choice.
Well, that's how. Once I opened up, it was like my finger was in an electric socket. I mean, it took about 9 months. Yep. And then it kind of came to, and then you deal with, my sister was the same way. But yeah, I do. And you can tell when people come to me for readings or to learn. I mean, you can tell where they are. And a lot of people are just there. They're just there. They want it. They open up.
Yeah.
So it's it's something else. But Daz, you have really, God almighty, you've really.
I was lucky to know.
Yeah, you had the instruction and your mother and all of that.
Yeah.
So
I
were very.
I consider myself very, very lucky when I meet people nowadays, in the field of remote viewing, in that I managed to have a very long basis of psychic research before I even knew what it was. To be honest, the library of books in my house, you see, were all psychic development books. It was all books about the other side.
That's what my mother. That's what I grew up with.
Yeah, and we were quite lucky to have that kind of thing. And most people that I meet, 99% of the people I meet, don't have that side of life, and they come into remote viewing. And of course, remote viewing is only a tiny sliver of what's going on out there.
And it's not spirituality. That's why. That's why the military. Okay, and Paul Smith was a Mormon, and he would bring Mormons in, because you couldn't advertise them. So anytime he would go to the Mormon church in Annapolis, Maryland. If a new person showed up, bring him into the unit. And like my boss, Fern Garvin, said, Angela, what you have is a way of life. Yeah. He said the CRV to these people, these Mormons, they can come into the office and do their CRV at the end of the day, close their desks, walk out the door, and they can go home and have their Mormon. The CRV doesn't interfere with their belief system. I was a threat to their belief system. And that was that. I mean, I used to go out to lunch with one woman, Robin, and Jeannie, the secretary. I mean, they would laugh. They'd go, "Boy, they hate you, Ann. We don't like you."
We don't.
They would laugh. I mean, but there were times I was uncomfortable. There were times I was arrogant. I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but at my age and everything I've been through. What more can happen at this point? What more can somebody say or do to me that hasn't been done?
Yeah. I'd love to expand a little bit, or it's a little bit of a pivot, but I know we talk about spirituality. We talk about there's that other side and how you grew up with this. What is your model that you use to understand that side of reality? Like, what is I'd be curious about what your big picture of what we're doing here, what this is. I mean, I know this is a lot of people are on these kind of quests to understand.
So no
what are they
pressure.
doing here on Earth?
What is the nature of existence?
What is the nature of?
Yeah.
Well, I love to get the perspective of people who delve into these kind of things, because you have to have some kind of model. Yeah.
Oh, I think we're brought. I mean, I believe in reincarnation. Do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I do. I believe, and I do believe that when planet Earth was formed, that we had help from other beings.
Mm-hmm.
They came to help us to make this planet. They really wanted to help humans. We keep screwing it up, and we keep coming back. And I don't know why we keep screwing it up. And Ed May thinks because we have in our DNA, we're hunters or we're killers, and I hate to think like that. But I think that we are evolving. I mean, if you read, aren't we supposed to be evolving into another higher level, and our DNA supposed to be changing?
Allegedly, yeah. I haven't seen
heard that one.
Yeah.
The way that the sun is positioning, or how the sun would come.
Isn't it the age of Aquarius or something we're meant to be moving into or something?
Yeah. But I don't know why we keep messing up, and I don't know why there's so many wars, and I don't know why this field is so difficult, why so many people are against this field at this late stage.
Yeah.
So you just try to do the best that you can, try to, and I can't believe that people can't believe that we need to take care of our planet. Like we have to. People don't seem to get that they don't say, oh, there's no climate change. I mean, we need to take care of our planet, our animals.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're here for. And I think that if we can just open ourselves up and be the best that we can be and just try to evolve, I think that's the best. Just try to do that. And I mean, I'm human too. I mean, I get angry and I get upset.
Yep.
And, but I do believe that, and I guess everything's supposed to get better, like Earth is supposed to get better and all of that. I do believe that, Christ, he was an avatar. I think he was a great teacher. There were many great teachers that walked this earth to try to help mankind and civilization.
How do you navigate? You've done a lot of channeling, and you've done a lot of work with spirits, I imagine, and things on that side. How do you navigate the entities on that side that don't necessarily have your best interests in mind? This is a topic we've discussed at length before, is how do you handle the challenges of that space? So I'd be curious how you view it and what you do about it.
I don't know. I don't think that they never had my best interest. Did you come across entities that don't have your best interest at heart? What do you do? I just ignore a lot.
That's fair. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Is you just don't engage energetically with them at all. But how do you know? Is it just like a sense kind of a thing? You're just like, got it.
Something like an annoyance.
Yeah.
So what happens when that happens to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I've experienced things where there are certain beings that might show up in my space, but the first impression, there's a facade where it's like, I'm here, I'm this heavenly, wonderful, I look at my bright light, I'm here to help you. But then if you actually drill down, I have a particular methodology I use to kind of get the case of a being, to understand what it's about, what it's trying to achieve, what it's trying to prevent, things like that. But when you start asking very pointed questions, the facade changes and sometimes falls away. And it's a way of kind of testing something, whether or not it actually has my best interest or the best interest of others involved, or it has some type of ulterior motive. And so I find that things aren't always as they appear in that space. They could come as an angel, but they're actually not. They're more of a negative type of thing that's trying to pull one over. Yeah. So,
what about you, Daz?
I've had similar to Brett, really. Mainly, I don't get it now. I don't get anything like this when I'm doing normal RV. It's almost like that's a different modality. I mean, it's very strange in the fact that I can switch between the two. But in the classical stuff, when we used to do the psychic group launch out into the universe, kind of, here I am kind of thing, I did have many, I wrote it in a book, to help people out on these kind of journeys. But I did have these kind of negative experiences with these shadow-like beings that they were a bit tricksterish. They just used to play tricks on me, and
they just
I
want
really
your
think-
attention, don't they? Really, the time wasting kind
it
of
was an
things.
ego thing for them, and they really didn't want us as humans to reach an attainable goal of being very good with our abilities. You know, they knew we had this amazing capability, and they didn't want us to know that we had the capability. Yeah.
Well, okay, that's good. I just do my guides. I mean, I always felt the presence of my guides, no matter.
Totally.
But I don't know, where do we go from here? I don't know. I would think that we would have been further ahead, but we're not.
Yeah. It does seem that way, doesn't it? Because you guys did some, we have to be honest, you guys did some really amazing cutting edge research and work, in the 80s and 90s. Fantastic work. It was well funded. And it seems like since then, I know we've all done our individual projects, and RV's moved on a little bit, but it does, I have to be honest, it does feel to me to be a little bit stagnant, and that the money is not there, the research isn't there. We haven't
had a lot
on as much as you guys did during those couple of decades.
Yeah, we lacked the funding, and that once that went, it was a lot on the funding, and we had people like Dale Graff and Ed May and Dr. These people didn't care what people thought of them. Yeah. I mean, they, and they did pay a price for it eventually in their careers. Yeah. After Dr. Verona left, we couldn't regroup. He really, and Dale stayed with us for a while. It was just they just didn't have the interest like these people did that kept us going. Then we lost it. And I do say the research and congressional help really helped us.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll ever change again? At the end of the Stargate program, what I've heard is that from others who worked in the program, that a lot of it was there are these super kind of Christian fundamentalists that hated anything to do with this program. That was part of it, right? And so that kind of put a big wall up of there ever being kind of expansion of this. I feel like the West has kind of moved from that to some degree. But do you think that there's an opening in the future where this type of program or this type of just the investigation of this by higher ups in intelligence would ever resurface? I mean, they might be doing it right now anyway. No one knows, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the word on the grapevine is that they are doing it right now.
Right.
Rather than
perspective, yeah. What do you think?
Maybe they are doing it right now. I don't know. All I know is the time that I did it. We went to an office that existed and we did it. Yeah. We had money coming through the Black program through Congress. There was money coming in, and we were heavy on the research through Ed May and through Dale Graff. We were looking at what other countries were doing. Whenever we did remote viewing, there was an oversight board that we had to report to say, are you cheating when you're remote viewing? If Ed was doing experiments with us, what are you doing? You can't be messing with their brains. So there was this large, we were in place. Yeah. Maybe other people are doing it, but if they are, where are they doing it? And where's the funding coming from? Because I don't think there's any funding. Yeah. But everybody, when I left the program, when it closed down in 95, I went back to headquarters and I became an analyst. They had me working some Russian stuff and then some Chinese stuff. Mm-hmm. But people knew, they knew who, I saw people that I used to know years ago, and they knew what I did. And everybody would come up to me and they'd say, I remote view and I'm still in touch with General Stubblebine and I give him information. Well, to me, that's not a remote viewing I said, good for you. Yeah. And then people would approach me and they wanted to have a project. Hey, do you think maybe we could get a program? So I would be working with these people, and as soon as they would approach someone to get a program, they would be laughed at or be told no, and then they would ignore me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so maybe there is something going on, but you can't. It's not at the extent that we did. And I think Ed May did some good volumes. And he just hopes that somebody after him can pick this stuff up. Now they're saying that AI is like remote viewing, but I don't think so. What do you think?
I know.
There's only going to be two jobs left in the future, right? Which is people who know how AI works and remote viewers. Everything else.
One thing AI will never do, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But you went on after the program to do a ton of other work outside of the military, right? Like, I'd be curious just to know just a little bit about the type of stuff you did afterwards.
Well, what happened is they put me, I was an analyst, okay? So in the intelligence cycle, you have people that collect, and then you have people that kind of disseminate. So as an analyst, I had to take whatever collection methods there were, and then I had to read it all, and then I would write reports for the policymaker. So being a female civilian, we never got the high-end accounts, right? The ballistic missile, how do you make a ballistic missile? We never got the high-end accounts, so we always got the low-end accounts. So I did work some Russian stuff. This was in 95. We looked at, I was with Defense Industries, and what we were looking at the enemy's hardware, whether it be tanks, and how do they work. Now, and I worked on those. Remember the treaties they had, the conventional treaties that Gorbachev and Bush did, or Reagan, where there were like the treaties where we would go to other countries and they would say they have so many weapons and we had to go count them. Well, I was on a couple of those treaties. I went to Romania and Germany.
Got it.
And
you did private sector stuff too, quite a bit, right?
What do you mean?
Like I don't know, like businessmen and things like that. Like you've done stuff like outside the military too, right?
Yeah, but I thought that wasn't much.
Got it. That's fair.
That wasn't much. I mean, I worked at psychic stores and used things like that, but not. I remember doing the business stuff. It wasn't that much. It just wasn't. It wasn't that much. But then in the government, and then they put me on the China.
Got it.
And then I did. I worked on I worked on the stuff that you make the hardware with, like like mining. I did mining, which nobody wanted to do that. I mean, it was such a low end account. Yeah. So anyway, I was writing. So anyway, what I did was I wrote a report on a metal that was very strategic. So I wrote this report. It was very tiny. And it went to the White House. It went to one of Obama's people, and they called down to the office, and they said they wanted more information. So everybody went crazy because the White House called, and then went over to State Department. But actually, what I wrote on changed policy on one area between China and the United States.
Interesting.
So that's where I made an impact. Now, I do remember, I wrote papers and, just typical stuff where this one guy was holding back my paper. And I said, I watched him one night and he was checking he was reading my paper. He was checking my footnotes. And I said, that paper's got to go out. And of course he said something like, this has to be right, it's hitting the street, it has to be right. So the guy I was working next to me, he put his paper in, and the guy who was holding up my paper, my team leader, he puts his paper right through. And then it comes back that the guy that wrote this paper, they said, hey, this is a piece of crap if ever got out of here. And he's holding up my paper. So when my paper finally went through, the embassies throughout the world were calling and saying, can you declassify this? They wanted to share it with some people. I think it shocked them. And then I think that one thing I did with the actually changing policy, I think that shocked people. But when I left, this one guy told me, it seemed like I just couldn't quite get together with the people that I worked with, but it's always seemed like there was always somebody higher up that could just kind of watch out for me. And I remember when I retired, this one guy came up to me and he said, Angela, you had an account that nobody had. He said, you wrote things. He said, I've been in defense industry for years. He said, I did not know the things. He said, every time you wrote something, I learned something new. And he said that, and he said, so that made me kind of feel good. And I can remember he would always come and see me after I'd write a paper, because it would be stuff that things just weren't written about. And somehow I just had to go through the, scratch through the surface and just do it. So that made me feel good. But it was rough. I tell you, it was rough. Those men are, and I tell you, women, I can remember we would work with these young girls. We were working with these young girls, and I mean, they would fight with everybody. And I was working with a woman next to me who was my age. Actually, she was born the same year. She was 8 days older than me. And I'd say, Gail, what's wrong with these girls? She said, Angela, they're not taking the crap that we took. She said, they're not putting up with what we put up with. And I thought, you know what? They were raised in a different their parents probably, they were just raised differently. Their parents were probably 2 generations younger than me, or a generation younger than me. And she said, Angela, they're not taking the crap. They're fighting for their rights.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I think what I heard, the last I heard, was the guy that was giving me a hard time about my paper. They asked him to retire because I guess they hired some young girl to come in and work. And he said, I wish they would have hired a man. He didn't want her. It scared her. She went back and she said, I don't want to work for him. He could ruin my career. Yeah. And so they sent her out. Yeah. And I said, good. But it is that mentality. It's that mentality. Okay. And the military will say, oh, no, we're not prejudiced against women. Maybe you're not, but you are against civilians.
Yeah.
It's a different world. It's a different world. And military would say, we work 24 hours and it was a lot of it. But you know what? I had a lot of good times though, too. Yeah. I mean, you can't take yourself serious and you got to have a good sense of humor. But a lot of people, they don't have they really take themselves so serious. I'm like, oh.
They do. Yeah. That's a big thing in our view. Absolutely. Yeah.
This is true.
You mentioned earlier you had a UAP kind of, or UFO experience in your life.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, that would be awesome if we could.
One time I was in 8th grade. So how old are you? 13 years old? We was a bunch of us kids. We were playing baseball, and it was dusk, writing to get dark. So we were walking across the baseball field to go home because it was getting dark, and we heard this swoosh, 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 swoosh. And we went, oh my God, there was a UFO. So we yelled and we screamed, and we were like, oh my God. And these people came out. They came out to the yard, and they saw the UFO. Now, that was the first one. Now, did I ever tell you about my UFO apartment I lived in, Daz?
I don't think so. No, I don't remember it.
Okay. Now, I was living in Arlington, Virginia, but when I went to the psychic program to work, I was living with my sister, and I did not want to live in Virginia and travel to Maryland. I would have never made it. So I said, why don't we go to D.C. and then you can go to Virginia and work and I can go up to Maryland to work. So I had a friend, and she was older than me. She must have been in her 60s. And I went to see her in the city. We used to walk the city, and she said, oh, come on over. She said, see that apartment building? I used to live there. So we go knocking on, and she told the landlord, she said, her and her sister need a place to live. So the guy said, okay, come on, you can get a place to live. So we lived in this apartment. Now, it was a 1-bedroom apartment, and about a year and a half later, the landlord says, the people down the next door, they're moving. It's a 2-bedroom. Would you two like to have it? And we said yes. And he said, I'll raise your rate a little bit. So I went back and told my friend, I said, he's moving me to apartment 205, I don't know, 105, 20, whatever. And she said, oh, my God, that's where I live. She said, that was my apartment. And she said, oh. So one night, I'm sitting there by myself, and she gets a call, I hear this ring. She says, hey, I'm down at the door. I have my friends here. She says, we want to come up. So they came up and she said, these are my friends. And this is where we would come and, they would come visit me at my apartment. And your bedroom was my son's bedroom. And there was a woman there named Madeline. And Madeline was just one of these people that just wasn't, she was just out there. Just out there. And so Madeline goes, well, Ruth, do you remember what happened in this apartment? And Ruth goes, no, what happened? And she said that there was an Egyptian guy by the name of Adamski who studied UFOs. And it was the first film of UFOs was shown in that apartment.
Wow.
And Madeline worked for Adamski. And Madeline in her house had apparently she had artifacts from these UFO people or whatever.
Oh, wow. I have his first edition hardback books.
Okay. Now, another incident happened in that apartment. There was a guy by the name of Dick D'Amato. He was our funding guy at Congress.
Yeah.
Dick D'Amato was the funder. He would put the money through the Black program for us. And he was big. He was doing a lot of parapsychology research. Well, he called me up one night and he said, Whitley Strieber, the guy who did Communion,
Yep.
Okay. Strieber, okay. He said, Whitley's in town. He's in a hotel not far from where I live. He said, can we meet at your apartment? Because Whitley had to get a plane back to New York and they didn't have time to go back to Dick's house in Annapolis. So I said, sure, come on up. So they came on up. So that apartment attracted Whitley, and Whitley, so we were talking to him and he was kind of, he's out of it too. These people that live with seeing UFOs, it's a whole different hookup. If you look, they're just different. Are they different as? They kind of, it's different. So he kind of had that same look as Madeline,
Did you know his history before you invited him?
Yeah. So we talked to him. He lived in fear. He was in fear. He lived really like, why me? Why me? And I'm like, why not? These things happen. But he gave me a rock. He said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but he gave me this rock, but I couldn't keep it. It was too powerful. I had to give it back. I just didn't want it. It was just too powerful. Now, when I retired from the government is when I started to have a lot of UFOs in 2010. And I saw a UFO above my house. I almost saw like the mothership and the little, like the little people walking around it. I've had contact with, I guess they're the Greys, where they're right in front of my face and I feel like I'm mentally talking to them. And I felt like I knew, one was like, hey, I felt like to one I was saying, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you for a while. That comfortable. So yeah, I was just comfortable. Did you ever have that, Daz?
I haven't personally. I know my family has, and that's what started, I think, my mother down the line of learning psychic stuff because when I was very young, I'm talking 4 years old or so, we had a lot of poltergeist activity, lights coming in windows, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think my family have. I haven't myself, but I have had a lifelong interest in researching UFOs, and I did that even before I got into psychic stuff and remote viewing, and it does seem to be that a hefty majority of remote viewers, and I even did a poll on Facebook on this, and I think it came out as something like 80% of remote viewers said that they'd had a UAP experience.
That's 80% of the ones that answered the poll anyway.
Yeah.
Didn't just see the word UFO and skip over it. So
yeah, it's pretty, it's pretty standard. I think that
seems to be.
Yeah.
It's what got me into remote viewing in the first place. Is I saw a UFO. I saw it was a triangle and it took off at like 1,000,000 miles an hour across the sky, faster than anything could move. And once I saw that, I was like, okay, there's a lot I don't know. And I was like, what else don't I know? And it led me to, I ended up at learning remote viewing after that.
It changes your life.
You could have just had a nice, normal, easy life. No drama.
A nice, normal, easy life. I was doing computer animation, art, like kind of what Daz was doing, except a different And I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing remote viewing now.
I would say you could have had no toxicity, but no, there is toxicity in UAP research. I mean, it's probably in every circle of research. To be honest, there are these toxic people that like to piss us off a little bit.
Someone was telling me about the history of Reiki. The like energy healing thing. That apparently it started off as a way to achieve enlightenment, and healing was just a side effect. And then it like split off, and we have the healing thing that we have now in the West because it was like one person who brought it. And apparently Reiki has exactly the same thing as the remote viewing field, where different people are doing it different ways and calling each other frauds and saying, "No, I have the one true way of doing it." And then somebody else has made up something completely new and called it Reiki, and like nobody will talk to them. And it's like exactly the same. It's so funny.
Do you know what the weird thing is, right? I talked to David quite a lot and Brett quite a lot, right? And literally 2 weeks ago, I was given a Hellfire remote viewing project, and it was the origin of Reiki, and I've done it, and I've got it on my desktop here, right? And I've never discussed Reiki with anyone in my entire life, right? And the last 3 podcasts I've been involved with, people brought up Reiki.
Synchronicities are overwhelming.
It was only like yesterday that somebody was talking to me about it. That's bad.
Yeah, it's just like it's crazy.
Because he just finished his training.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I channeled formulas years ago. I don't know the meaning. Yeah, I would like. I had. They deal with organic chemistry, physics, and math. The problem is I had people look over them over the years, and there was one woman I became friends with. She was a Army captain. She came to me for a reading, and she kind of made a lot of sense out of them. Some woman that worked at Department of Energy kind of helped me with them. But that's another thing I would like to somehow. I guess I need an organic chemist, and I gotta look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Gary Nolan. He's into a lot of UAP research. He's got a couple of PhDs. He might be a good person to do that with. Are you in contact with How Putoff at all? Because How is a very close friend of Gary. He might be able to get you a contact. If not, I'd be happy to try to do that for you.
Yeah, see if you can get me his email. They have to do with light waves, how the sun hit us. Okay, I kept using the word osmosis, but it's not osmosis. I forget it. It's the way that the sun's hitting the earth is changing, and that and it may have to do with like solar waves. I don't know what it deals with.
Yeah. I'll speak to you off topic here, and if I can get like a small, a paragraph or something about you on what this is and stuff, I'll see if I can pass it along.
I'll email you. I have your email. I'll email you.
Awesome.
Just something. Email you. I'll email, when they were channeled, a little thing on what we think they are. It may be a new energy or something.
Yeah. Absolutely. We'll get in front of a couple of the scientists and see what they can.
People over the years, and they're just, they just don't. They don't know, and they don't. Yeah. They were more interested in me remote viewing than the form. They wanted me to remote view. They were just.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Maybe you should ask ChatGPT or one of the AI tools to interpret the formula for you and probably make some sense of it. If you can get it in there. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Angela. I think we should wrap this up because we've got...
Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
It's always a pleasure. That's the first time you interviewed me. I was so nervous.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, no. You're
natural.
You're never nervous as I am, Angela. I hate being on camera and on audio every single time. I really hate it. You were a natural.
Oh, thanks. I was afraid of you because of whenever you got involved with the program, because I thought you were just straight CRV. And
I kind of was.
Yeah, he's changed his tune now. He's teaching cowboy remote viewing now.
I mean, I do teach a formal method, but I teach it in such a way that the people that come through my program with me, it takes a year, and if they want to, if it works for them to do it all differently, I go with the flow, and they do it differently.
Well,
whatever worked best for them.
No, I think it was because how you got my name. It could have been through the CRV people, or
It was,
and I associated you with the CRV people, and I was so nervous. I was so scared. But you know what? You're easy.
Angela,
Nice.
you're one of the nicest and most honest and one of the people with the most natural ability that I've met within the remote viewing circle. And it pains me that there are people out there that have gone out of their way to try to make your part be smaller than it actually is.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, they would. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess I've lived with it for so long. But like those girls would say, they don't like you, and they loved it. They don't like you, but you know it is what it is. But it's okay. I'm trying to get my own story. I'm trying to get my own story out.
Yeah.
And I think I
You
am.
should.
I think I'm going to do it. It took a lot of years to write it. It took a lot of courage. It takes a lot of honesty. It takes a lot, because I'm not always right. You know, like there were things just things I didn't do that were right. So it takes a lot. I mean, and I do other kind of writing, but this was hard. But I think I'm getting to the point where, you know what, I'll put this out. It's
awesome. Yeah. And Angela, you know, if you want and need any help in you know, promoting yourself, your history or anything like that, you know, us as a team and us as individuals and many other people are there for you. So just reach out to us, and you know, we'll be there to help you any way we can.
Well, if you guys want anything, you guys are great. You guys, if you need anything, just call me. Let me know. But we may need help. Maybe if we get the documentary, we can.
I would love to do some ERV training with you.
Okay.
So maybe we can arrange something off record.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I've
Come
never
on.
done any ERV in my life, so it'd be interesting to
Come on, guys. Our listeners are going to be falling asleep like they're doing an ERV. So, you know, let's wrap this up.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
goodbye, everybody.
in
Thank you
touch.
so much.
We'll be in touch.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much, Angela. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
take care.
Messages. I don't know. Mind-sucking aliens. Have you ever watch out for the physics, right? Have you ever had an 80s right up your ass, which I started? There's something that started